Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked. You can't have a successful career without knowing how to deal with the unexpected, and Unlocked is here to help you do that. If you're a person who sets goals that challenge you to fully reach your potential, this show is for you. This is a show all about opening possibilities so that when you're hit with the unexpected, you have options from which to choose. You can learn more about the show on my website, madelineblair.com/unlockedtv. It includes, by the way, all of the earlier shows as replays. And if you have topic ideas or questions for me about the show, just email them to me at madeline@madelineblair.com. And of course, if you're curious about the background of this show, check out my book, Unlocked: Discover How to Embrace the Unexpected, available on Kindle, audio, and paperback. If you would like to explore what it means to build and nurture your resilience with me, be sure to sign up for my mailing list. It's on my website, madelineblair.com. I'll keep you informed about new group mentoring programs, Unlocking Together. And if you are wanting a one-on-one, just email me direct to madeline@madelineblair.com and put the word unlocked in the subject line. Today's topic is the evolution of a career. Let's begin with talking about that word, evolution. The first words that tend to come to mind are survival of the fittest, implying a huge push to be the best, the biggest, the strongest. But what Darwin actually was referring to was a species that is most adaptable to change, which implies a certain level of curiosity. Let's keep that in mind. We're going to look with a wide view today. You may think of your career as a single path from A to B, but even if you're able to stay in the same industry, it is unlikely that you will remain in the same job or even the same company. My path, or your path, is going to take curves and side roads. If you look at the future of work, you know that a single path is unlikely with all the changes in technology. Just look at what has happened to retail that has evolved from brick and mortar style to internet-based commerce. In any event, we all seem to understand that our career will evolve. But there's another path that stimulates change, and sometimes the change comes from within. What happens when you decide that your original idea of a career doesn't really fit you? Have you considered how you might transition to a better fit by educating yourself, or perhaps calling upon knowledge and skills you have developed for personal reasons? Or what happens when you're ready to retire? Have you thought about what life will be like to be free of obligations every day? Can you build options now that can become choices for that transition or free time when it happens? Today, we're going to talk about the evolution of a career and what you might consider right now, regardless of where you are in your career. The key is to open possibilities so that when you're ready, you have options from which to choose. Where have you heard that one before? My guest today is my friend Dominique Lallement. He and I, how long have we known each other, Dominique? 30 years, maybe?
Yes.
Maybe longer? Welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, let me tell my audience about you a little bit so they get to know you. Dominique is an economist educated at Princeton University and with over 45 years of experience in international development, primarily at the World Bank. After retiring from the bank in 2006, she pursued her passion for international development and poverty reduction by focusing her consulting activities on issues related to gender equality and social inclusion, employment, enterprise development, energy, and climate change. That's a wide palette, Dominique. She is also committed to training and mentoring younger people to give them the benefit of her experiential knowledge and pass on the flame, as she says. During all this time, she has volunteered for many causes, from educational scholarships to art. I was impressed with the number of groups and projects she has worked on with as a volunteer. On top of this, she raised two daughters and enjoys the status of grandmother to three grandchildren. Since 2010, she has been involved with one cause that I suspect gives her constant challenge and satisfaction. And that project is president of the Board of Trustees of American Friends of Chartres, a nonprofit dedicated to the preservation of the Cathedral of Notre Dame de Chartres, France. I hope you sense the evolution in her career. So again, welcome, Dominique, to Unlocked, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Madeleine.
I'm really excited to explore all these things you have done and are still doing. But let's begin by talking about what drew you to be an economist and spend so many years in international development.
Very simply, I think two major topics that I discovered when I was a teenager. One is poverty, and the other one is immigration and immigration. I was born and raised in Western France, in Nantes, after the Second World War, and that means that we went through the War of Independence of Algeria. Mm. And my hometown was host to many French Algerians who were coming back from Algeria, or who had never set foot in the metropolis, as they called it, meaning France, because they were born and raised and had the early part of their adult life in Algeria. Concomitantly, we had many Algerian workers and workers from other countries, Portugal in particular, also Spain, who immigrated into our city. So very early on, mixing with these people, I discovered what it was, what it meant to be poor economically, but not only economically, also not to have basic education, being illiterate. And there was one very specific event that I witnessed when I was about 13 or 14 of an Algerian man who was trying to simply buy an umbrella. The price tags were not indicated in the shop. And I heard the shopkeeper giving him a price, which was very high. So I asked her, I said, what's the price of that umbrella? To me, she gave a different price. And I was totally outraged. So I told the man the price is. And of course, the shopkeeper was not very happy by my interference. But somehow this triggered something in me that you need to get a basic education in order to be able, to have access to your rights, to fairness. And that was the start. And after that, I must say, through different experiences in my hometown, I was a Girl Scout, and we would do things to help some of the poor people in the community. I also went around with the girls and we interviewed immigrant families. Some spoke French, some did not, but we managed to communicate what it meant to be uprooted. And I also did some tutoring of children whose families had come from Algeria. So after that, I never stopped, and I still do it.
I think it's the most beautiful story. I love it. I love the fact that you brought it down to a simple event that I could even see in my mind's eye, as you were describing it. Beautiful. I want to thank you for that. Oh gosh. Well, you continue to do this work even though you have left the bank. And do you feel that this is just sort of a continuation of your career at the bank, or do you really feel it's evolved a little bit further?
When I retired from the bank, I had five, possibly six very clear ideas. I had one great source of inspiration, Nelson Mandela. He decided to leave his active political life um, about the same time as I decided to retire from the bank. And I was listening to an interview between him and some students in Durban when they said, "Why are you leaving us?" And they were all in tears and sad. And he answered, um, "As long as there is poverty, there is work to do, and I will still be engaged." And I thought, well, here is my best reason to leave the World Bank and to move on and keep being engaged. So there were a number of things I was sure I wanted to do. One, I had had a terrific career at the World Bank, and I wanted to give back. And for me, the best way to give back is to do training and to do mentoring. I was very clear about that. I had one theme that I wanted to continue to be engaged in. It was gender equality and equity. There was also more time with family and friends. You know, when you are at the World Bank, you try your best, but at the end of the day, 24 hours are not enough. And I wanted to do more time, more quality time with family and friends. And finally, more art and travel, a different type of travel. But art was also a very prominent theme to which I wanted to dedicate more time. So after the bank, I feel that, and this is over 16 years ago now, but I feel that I've been able to pursue all these goals that I had when I left the bank. And in a way, it has been an expansion over what I was doing in the bank. But I had also laid the foundations for some of the things which I've been able to do now while I was still working at the World Bank. And I'll give you one specific example. When I was a manager for infrastructure programs in in 8 countries of the former Soviet Union, I wanted to build in cultural heritage in the type of infrastructure work that we were doing, because all of these countries had an incredible cultural heritage capital in terms of their urban structures and everything. But it was difficult. There was basically no budget for it. So shortly after I retired, I was given the opportunity to join the board of trustees of American Friends of Chartres. So I'm jumping forward, but that's one of the things that American Friends of Chartres has brought to me, the opportunity to work on my dream, which is cultural heritage.
I love the fact that you really have identified those things that are important to you. But speaking of which, how did you fit raising 2 girls in when you were at the bank? Because I remember my days at the bank, and you don't have much time left or energy left over at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I've been very fortunate that I have, a wonderful family. I have these 2 wonderful girls who have become wonderful young women and mothers. And they were at times resentful of my career at the bank, but at times they were my greatest supporters. At times I had, this was pre-home computer days when they were little. And at times I had to go back to the bank and finish a report at the bank's computer. So I would pack my little girl and bring a pillow and a blanket, and she would sleep on the floor, and she was very happy. And, the other one would draw and draw and draw until it was time to go home. So they did experience the World Bank buildings quite a bit, but more significantly, for family reasons, I didn't want to have very long missions. One of my daughters didn't do well when I was on long missions, so I
But tell,
managed to
tell the
plan.
audience what a mission is.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So a mission is simply a business trip, as they would call it today.
Mhm.
And I guess the bank still has this terminology because we're a bit of uh, proselytism. It's hard to say in English, we think that we have a message, we have something to do, we have a purchase, and so on. So we need to also convince our partners about a certain approach at the same time as our basic job is to understand their needs,
Mhm.
understand their situation, and so that we can work together.
Mhm.
So this is the my definition of a World Bank business trip. And so I started planning my long business trips during the summers when they were on vacation. And that way I was able to take them with me. So they also had their experience of
Mhm.
development and they saw what their mother was doing when she was on these trips. So my little one, I don't think my eldest one, sorry, I don't think she remembered much of the first two trips because she was 15 months old, 16 months old on the first one. We went to Madagascar. And the second one, she was about 3 years old, and we went to Brazil. But even at three, we were having dinner and on a terrace and with some colleagues. And then a little girl came begging. And she looked at me and she says, Mama, why is this child asking for food? So whether she internalized
Mm.
it or not, I know that it stayed with her.
Mm.
And then we went together with the two girls this time to Burkina Faso. And we were lucky enough to see the only herd of elephants that was left in Burkina Faso, which happened to cross the road one morning. We were going to a little town. And then we went together for a longer trip to Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia one summer, just when those countries joined the World Bank in the summer of 1993. And the one key message of that experience, my little one will tell you, oh, I was privileged to visit a water treatment plant. But we also took a family trip in a little island of Saarinen of the coast of Estonia, and we had to go and get our food in the local supermarket. So they saw what was still a quote unquote Soviet supermarket, where you had a few very old apples, big chunks of processed cheese, big chunks of processed meat, huge jars of beets and cabbage and potatoes and nothing else. And for them, I think that experience, put into light
Mm.
what it was like not to have the abundance that you have in America. But the other thing I want to mention from this trip, there was a state dinner given for my visit by the Minister of Transport of Lithuania with the other ministers of transports from the two other Baltic countries, Estonia and Latvia. And I had left my daughters in the hotel room, and the ministers were, where are your children? I said, well, this is an official dinner. He said, please go and get your children. So I got them, and then he gave a little speech, and he said, the greatest gift you've given us is bringing your children, because that shows that you are trusting us as human beings. You're
Wow.
trusting us as countries. And this was to me, such a powerful statement about the links that you can build
Mm.
across nations, but it also goes through a personal link and a family link with the people you work with.
Oh, that story is amazing. How would you ever have anticipated that? Not just that they invited them, but that they made that conclusion from
That's right.
that act.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And I think of so many people who feel like children should not be a part of the workplace. That I don't mean they should be working, but that you can't even talk about your children in work, when in
Right.
fact they're part of your life.
Yes.
I'll never forget. Many years ago, I did a workshop, and it was actually at the World Bank, where we were talking about the fact that those kids at home are still with you in the bank, and that
Yes.
became, we tried to help people understand that was a legitimate thing to talk about. And your comment just reinforces for me that we have to acknowledge that we have a fullness to our lives.
That's right.
It's not just
Yes.
up here. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, speaking of fullness, I read through all the volunteer things that you have done, both while you were in the bank and since. I think you should enumerate some of them, Dominique.
Well, while I was at the bank, and I'll make the link with the children, right? Because not being American, I really did not know anything about the American schooling system. And I decided that one of the best way to learn was to be engaged. So when my eldest daughter started at the local public school, I became involved with the PTA, and eventually I became the co-president of the PTA, sorry, as well as co-president of what was called the Six School Complex, which was a group of 6 public schools. So there were some very interesting experiences through that, some that I consider funny, like this meeting of the PTA, where, of course, in October, lice had made their appearance in the school. And during the meeting that I was chairing, a lady said, well, it's because of all these foreigners that we currently that we currently are having at the school. And someone went, so next chapter. But more significantly, it was for me a way to network with other presidents of public schools. And the more crucial moments was when we were given the opportunity to attend the hearings for funding the public school budget with the city council of the District of Columbia. And as the co-chair of the PTA, I would go through these hearings, but I was very shy, and my name was always the last one because I was really nervous to speak in public with my accent. And so I would listen to the others until 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, knowing that I would have, to get up at 6 and get the household running. But it was such an education. I would hear, especially the directors of the schools from the poorest wards in the city, 5, 6, 7, and 8, where they were describing the dreadful conditions of the buildings, the security issues, the lack of teachers, the lack of supplies. And I could not believe my ears. I said, is this a developing country, or am I in the capital of the richest country of the world?
Yeah.
And that, in a way, this activity reinforced, even more my commitment to doing something for poverty reduction in developing countries, but hopefully also in our country. So when I obtained my green card after leaving the World Bank, that's the only reason why I'm excited of paying my taxes, especially my local taxes, thinking that hopefully some will go towards expanding the quality of education in the District of Columbia. And, I know that real estate taxes are supposedly earmarked for that. But I think that's really where, if I could give all of my money for education and health in the District of Columbia, that's what I would do.
Oh, wow. And by the way, for our audience, the green card is a permission that you can remain in the country and be employed. Yes?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Without being an American citizen.
Without, right.
Yes.
I am struck by how much your children are just so totally intertwined in your life. I'm so impressed that you chose that priority.
Yeah. I want to put one footnote
Mhm.
to what I just said about the District of Columbia.
Mhm.
I've also been involved with the Margaret McNamara Memorial Grants. It's called now MEG. And it's a program that offers scholarships for women from developing countries who come and study in the States, but there are also a number of other programs. One with Latin America, where they can study Latin America, another one in South Africa, and another one with Trinity University in the District of Columbia.
Hmm.
And we just started one with French universities. But the program with Trinity University is achieving exactly what I am aiming at,
Mhm.
improving, giving those women through those grants the ability to further their
Mm.
education. And many of them work in the field of education, counseling, and health. That's what most of the degrees are for.
Mhm.
And I know that these women will contribute to improving the life of women and children in the District of Columbia. They are
Fantastic.
outstanding. Yes.
Fantastic. Oh, I love that. And by the way, to the audience, we're going to put in the replay section of my website after the show all the links so that if you're interested in this particular activity, you can see the link to explore more on it. So, all right. Well, we've talked about a lot of things, but I know that right now, today, I shouldn't say that, having just listened to what you said. I'll just say one of your passions today is the cathedral in Chartres, where you were invited to become a board member, and now you're the president of the American Friends of Chartres. I wonder if you would just begin talking about what that is. And we have some beautiful slides. Anytime you want to use them, Dominique, just say so and I'll bring them up.
Right. Well, why don't you bring the first slide so that people can
All right.
visualize Chartres.
Visualize. There it is.
So Chartres, Notre-Dame de Chartres, this cathedral is a Gothic cathedral, which the first, I was going to say the first version of it, or the first church on which was built in the 10th century was a Roman church. And like all churches, they burned over the years. There were tremendous fires and so on and so forth. And of course, the most recent that we've experienced is sadly the one of Notre Dame de Paris in 2019. Yes, sorry, I'm blanking on 2018 or 2019. I believe it was April 15 of 2019. But the Notre Dame de Chartres had burnt in 1194. And on the occasion, they rebuilt a full-fledged Gothic cathedral. And it was rebuilt in 25 years, which had never done as fast previously in the history of Gothic cathedrals. So the building is mostly 12th and the facade that you see is 12th century, but which was left from the 1194 fire.
Mm.
But the rest is 13th century. But of course, over time, the stone deteriorates, and there are events like wars which damage the churches and buildings, unfortunately. Sadly enough, we see daily the destruction that's happening in the Ukraine as an example.
Mm.
But Notre Dame de Chartres has survived, and it still needs constant investments in restoration and preservation. So when I first really visited the cathedral, I was a student, and we had a student pilgrimage whereby we walked 40 kilometers from the cathedral. And it was a national pilgrimage, so you had students from all over France. So it took us, we walked the 40 kilometers basically over a couple of days, slept in farms in the hay, did not wash probably for a couple of days, and arrived at the cathedral. And when I did that, the cathedral was extremely dark. And we had thousands of students sitting in there and smelling pretty bad. And that combined with the smell of incense and candles and so on was not the most spiritual experience, if I may say so. So moving forward in 2010, I was invited to join the board of trustees of American Friends of Chartres. And then I thought, stained glass, 12th century, 13th century stained glass. Chartres has 175 windows and the largest collection of medieval glass under one roof in the world.
Mm.
And I had always been fascinated by stained glass, largely for artistic and romantic reasons. When you see the sun shimmering through the glass, your mind can just, wander away, and it's magnificent. So I said yes. And I thought I could contribute at least 2 or 3 things to the organization. I could bring from the World Bank my experience in fundraising, because I had to do some fundraising when I was at the bank for one of the programs which I managed. But I could bring my passion for stained glass, for medieval history, and one of my deepest and strongest values is friendship.
Mm.
And I could see that this particular church was a place where you can build friendship, but it's also a place where you can experience peace and reflection. And I believe that the world needs that. It needs places for peace and reflection and reaching out to other people, understanding other people. So to me, that was what American Friends of Chartres, or the journey of American Friends of Chartres, was going to be and has been.
You tell such wonderful stories. I remember being in a cathedral in France, and you're right about the fragrance
Mm-hmm.
that exists in those cathedrals. In fact, the memory I have is quite different. The memory I have is one where the perfumes that people wore in France were so
Oh,
much more delicious than the ones that I
right,
smelled in America. And
right.
that's one of the things that I remembered. But
Yeah.
isn't that funny?
So maybe you could bring, Madeline, the pictures which show the work of preservation,
Absolutely, absolutely, I can do
so
that.
that our friends watching the show can see the difference.
Yes.
So here you have the dark and the light. And so part of the preservation work, which is underway, is there has been a huge effort made to clean the stone, which has blackened over time. And you see what it looks like when it is cleaned, to the right of the picture in clear. But also all the windows get cleaned and restored. And what American Friends of Chartres does is to raise money in the US to help finance some of the restorations. So far, we've done the 5 lancets of the South portal. You can bring that picture so that are to be seen. So before the restoration, you could actually not see the faces
Mm.
the um, of the saints on those windows. While now the clarity is absolutely amazing. And I will quote here what one of our donors who was in Chartres with us in 2019 said. She said, "You know, it's just like being in a jewel box because the light shines through, and then you can see, you know, the illumination just with natural light
Mhm.
of all of these windows, and it just goes straight into your heart," which I thought was absolutely beautiful.
Oh, like
So
a jewel.
we also organize some cultural events, and we have a beautiful film about the restoration called Chartres Light Reborn.
Now,
Uh,
can we post a link to that along with the
It,
others?
there is no open link.
Ah,
There is a DVD that's available.
mhm.
Uh, but if, in particular, if there are educators who would like to show the link to their students, I can obtain the permission for a temporary
Okay,
open link. Yes.
very good. Yeah, I had the privilege of watching that, and it's extraordinary to see the steps that has to go through in order to make those stained glass windows jewel boxes. I was stunned at the multiple things that had to be done. Yeah, very illuminating in many ways. So, so this is what you are doing now. Uh, is there well, let me put it this way. You mentioned that Notre Dame of Paris burned, and it's the restoration I know is now underway. From what you know of the restoration work at Chartres, what is likely to be the greatest challenge in the Paris restoration?
To the best of my knowledge, and again, you know, I rely, like most people, on information that's in the press. And the French have done a very good job, I think, in documenting and sharing the progress and so on and so forth. Initially, the major concern was whether the vault would hold. So there has been a lot of consolidation work which has been done. Um, and fortunately, and some say it's a miracle, that the stained glass was not damaged.
Mm.
So, you know, it has been taken down and it doesn't have as big a collection of medieval glass as Chartres, but it also has very beautiful glass and it did not get damaged.
Mm.
So it will be also restored. But I think that the major challenge is really the schedule. Uh, they want the bulk of the work to be done for 2024, which is timed to coincide with the Olympic Games, because it will bring lots of visitors and
Mhm.
supporters. But I think that's a real challenge. But I cannot speak more in terms of whether, you know, it will be absolutely finished or not finished. I think part of the reconstruction and restoration will definitely be done so that the public will be able to access at least part of the church.
I'm, you know, as you say, the time. I'm now that I think about it, I'm not surprised because you've been involved with the Friends of Chartres for now what 12, 13 years, and you're
Yeah.
still restoring.
Yes.
And
Yes.
from 2019 to 2024 is only 5 years, so it's very clear that they have a much more difficult situation to deal
Yeah.
with.
The damage was so extensive. Yes.
I also was struck by your comment that these are places of peace and reflection. Uh, I would say some people would say, well, that's obvious, but it's not obvious that they are places of peace and reflection. And in today's world, those are two things that uh, often get lost. Even in our day to day, they get lost.
Right.
And even though it is an emphasis on Western culture, this particular cathedral, it still can give peace and reflection to those who come from other cultures.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you another story. One of my fondest interaction with visitors in Chartres was a group of young women who were Muslim from Marseille.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember exactly how we got talking, but I said, "Oh, what brought you here?" And they said, "It was our dream from having studied about Gothic architecture in history class during our secondary school studies. So we just got our diploma, our French baccalaureate, and our parents give us a trip to Paris and Chartres. So they took the train from Marseille and visited Chartres. But we should also remember that architecture is a dialogue over time. You know, Gothic architecture didn't spring out of nothing. If you look at Islamic architecture, the foundations of Gothic architecture are also found in Islamic architecture. In the Middle Ages, you know, when uh, Andalus, the southern part of Spain, you know, was basically predominantly Arab and Muslims. Um, you had dialogues between all religions, and they would travel. They would travel. They would come to the beginnings of the Sorbonne and have debates about all the monotheist religions. And, you know, the French and other European scholars would travel to Spain. So there were all of these exchanges.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, yes, it is what it is today. But believe it or not, in the cathedral itself, there is a tiny little insert in copper that looks to me like a musharabiyeh, you know, which is in Islamic architecture, the iron or wood, you know, rings like this, which you also find, you know, in some of the older Romanesque or early Gothic architecture in what's called the jubé. You know, it was a wood or stone structure that separated the clergy from the lay people. So all of these are dialogues. So my view is let's take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And have this dialogue. Yeah.
Ah, that's fantastic. And I've read certainly about the time when scholars did come together from from all religions
Mm-hmm.
because they really saw there was value in exploring together.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a pity we have lost some of that.
Yeah.
I'll just say some of that. I won't say all. Uh, I want to shift our conversation a little bit. My audience is made up principally of people in their career. So they're in their 30s, 40s, early 50s. And you have made it feasible to actually pursue many avenues at the same time. And I just wonder if you have some advice you would give that would help them see the possibilities for letting their careers really evolve, even when it means something unexpected will happen.
Yes, you know, at times there are points of stress in careers, right? You get a little bit overwhelmed because you are trying to be the best professional at the World Bank or somewhere else. Then you try to be the best mother, the best spouse, and you know, the pile gets up and then oof, all of a sudden. So it's time for pause and reflection and say, okay, I need to weed something out. So I think that's a principle that on and off I've taken, mini sabbaticals to sort of regroup and think and what I want to do next. But they are constants also. So, art has been for me one of those constants, as well as reading. I've never stopped reading throughout my career at the World Bank because that was my time reading. And if I had not finished my book by Sunday morning, the children knew they had to give me 1 hour to finish my book. Then we could have breakfast. but art has also been, this the way of weaving these fabrics amongst many interests. So now I'm also volunteering in various art endeavors. But what I would say, generally, and I know we need to be aware of the time, but I see life as a stream of opportunities. And these are opportunities that need to be captured. We create who we are and what we become. So if we know our passions, whether these are passions to learn about people, learn about nature, whatever the passion is, these passions are to me, the weft of what we can build upon and develop our careers. So I see careers as a source of joy and satisfaction, because without joy and satisfaction, we're not productive. So what, as an economist, I learned is that there is Pareto optimality. That was my great economic discovery. So applying that to myself, I know that when I'm joyful, happy, I'm very productive. So this is a principle that I try to monitor. If I'm not happy with something, it means that it's not right for me at this particular moment. And then you move on. So the other things that I think is important is not to say, okay, I'm going to work, and then I'll retire and then I'll see. For me, it has worked in a different way. I laid the foundations of a number of things throughout my careers. I picked what I knew were my real passions. And now in the permanent development of my careers, I continue building up on those foundations. So that's some of the reflections that I have.
Excellent.
Above all, I think I've been very fortunate. I've had a tremendous career. I have a fabulous family. I have fabulous friends with whom I can share my values, my passions, my dreams, and my commitment for a better world.
Fantastic.
But lastly, if you want to resource yourself, come to Chartres.
There is one thing that you said, which I think if you can just describe it, Pareto optimal. Tell me a little bit about that so people will understand what you meant by that.
It's win-win. So if you are happy, you will make other people happy. Okay. If you are productive, you will help other people, whichever way, through mentoring, through training, through being their supervisors or being their co-workers, to be productive as a team. Mm-hmm. And I wish I could apply that principle to humanity. I'm still a dreamer. But I think we can be a better humanity, in a better world.
Do not stop dreaming, Dominique. Do not stop. Well, I just am so thankful that you have been a part of Unlocked for today. What comes out of this is that peace and reflection. I loved that phrase, and that life is a stream of opportunities. What wonderful things that I am going to take away from this as well as other thoughts. I wonder if you have any closing comment that you want to make.
I think those last thoughts were really my closing comments.
Okay.
I think I see everyone is tremendously rich and powerful. So we have to find, those elements that we can bring out, that we can give and share with others. And that's where I think it's really important for people of my age, if I may say so, without disclosing it, because that's what we give to the next generations.
Mhm.
I'll give you a very small example. Behind me, you are seeing a little bit of flowers, right? These I found on my doorstep this morning with a simple word, you know, belated happy birthday, thank you, Ibrahim. What did I do for this young man? A year ago, he could not get to renew his passport, his French passport. I helped him for 2 hours, nothing more, 2 hours to weave his way through the website in French that he could not comprehend to renew his passport. And now we discovered we were birthday buddies. But that he remembered, I cannot tell you how surprised I was. And to me, it's the essence of life. I have many little gifts of life that people have shared with me. At times, it's something that a child has built. At times, it's something that an old man has built. But we interacted. And my passion for people is this: there is in every one of us so much wealth and so much to give and so much to share.
Ah, this is why we have remained friends and for so many years.
Yes.
We very much share that feeling. And I have to tell the audience a little story about you, the way in which you uh, take care of relationships. Many years ago, and I think it was in 93, I had surgery, and you sent me a basket of flowers, a tiny basket of flowers. I have never forgotten that. Never. Never will. That's what Dominique does. Small things, but they add up. They add up. Oh, Dominique, what a pleasure. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of this show.
Thank you for having me. This was great fun to spend this time with you, Madeline.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Oh my. What a delight. This is the way for me to begin a day, to have such a exciting and warm conversation. And I hope that this conversation has piqued your curiosity a bit about your own career evolution. I loved the words that Dominique said about that life is a stream of opportunities. And have you thought about what it is that gives you pleasure, what gives you joy? And can you weave that into your work as well as in your personal life? I think we sometimes think we can only do that in our personal life, and yet we spend so much of our energy in our work life. It should be a place that brings us some joy, hopefully peace even. That's a little harder, but certainly a little joy. Gosh, my hope is that you have begun to see the connection between being curious about yourself, and because we've been talking about curiosity quite a bit these days, curious about yourself and your career, and how you can bring those two together to steer your career to the evolution that you want it to be. I want to thank you for joining me on this segment of Unlocked, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, make a comment on social media about what you learned and might do differently as a result. And if you're on YouTube, click the like button. Better yet, subscribe. I'm Madeline Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.